Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks. This week I have Truth or Dare by R.L. Stine from the Fear Street series. I haven't read this book before. I wasn't able to find it in an EPUB or a text file or a Mobi or anything like that, so I purchased it from Ave Books. The book itself is kind of beat. The jacket's got some wear. The pages are kind of bent inside, and that's okay. It's a used book. What do you want? I don't know anything about this book. On the front, there's two people on a ski lift, and they look kind of horrified. That's all I got. I don't have any idea what this is going to do. It's a very short novel. It's less than 150 pages, but it has like 29 chapters. So we're going to have another one of those ridiculous books where it's going to be like 5 episodes long, and you're going to get like part 1 will be chapters 1 through 10 or something crazy like that. There's going to be some longer chapters in here somewhere, but I wouldn't expect any chapter to be anywhere above 10 minutes long. I don't know how many characters there are. We're going to have to just figure that out as we go. As always, I am not a trained voice actor. I'm just a guy that does this for fun. And this time I am in a different studio, so if I sound a little bit different for these first few chapters, that's why. I will be at my normal studio tomorrow recording, as I usually do. So let's get started. If you want to get in touch with me, you can write me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I'm also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me tell them tales from R.L. Stine. So thank you very much for listening, and let's get started. Welcome to a Nightfall Audiobooks production of Truth or Dare by R.L. Stine, a Fear Street novel, Book 28. Chapter 1. The long white stretch limo rolled over a deep pothole in a twisting country road. Sitting in the back, enjoying our unaccustomed luxury, my friends and I felt only the tiniest bump. "This car is awesome," Ken Knight declared. "I think I'll get one after graduation." "In your dreams?" Jenny Bird replied. "You had to borrow on your allowance to get your bike fixed?" She gave him a hard shove, which sent him bumping into me. Jenny, Ken, and I were slouched low in a smooth black leather seat. Ken sat in the middle. A boy named Josh Berman sat across from us. The three of us didn't know Josh. He didn't go to Shadyside High. Josh seemed quiet and shy. He hadn't said 2 words since we had stopped to pick him up. He was short and very thin, but kind of good-looking. He had wavy black hair and dark eyes. He wore glasses and kept constantly pushing them up on his nose, a nervous habit. As we rode along, he stared out the window, pretending to be interested in the scenery. Sometimes he laughed at the things we said, but he didn't offer comments of his own. Too shy, I guess. "April, I'll buy you a limo too," Ken declared, turning to me with a grin. "What color do you want?" "Lime green," I answered, without thinking about it. "And I'd like a sky blue one too. For weekends, with a pale blonde interior, to match my hair." "Okay, 1 lime green limo for Miss April Leeds," Ken said. "If Dara can have a limo, I don't see why we can't all have one." "Dara is rich," I reminded Ken, even though I didn't have to. We all knew Dara Harker was rich. Dara reminded us constantly. "Where is Dara?" Josh suddenly spoke up. He had been silent for so long, he startled me. "She told me she'd be riding to the ski house with us," he said. "Huh? Are you kidding? Dara ride with us peasants?" Ken cried in mock horror. Jenny and I laughed, but Josh didn't crack a smile. "Dara is coming up with her parents in the Jeep," I told him. "So we'll have a 4-wheel drive car in the snow." "What snow?" Jenny complained, glancing out the window. Evening had fallen, sending a hazy wash of gray over the passing farms. A silvery frost blanketed the dark, winter-bare fields. It was cold enough to snow, but we hadn't seen a single flake in days. "I turned on the Weather Channel before I left," Jenny said, brushing back her short brown hair. She tugged down the sleeves of her sweater. "I always watch the Weather Channel before I go anywhere. They said a 40% chance of flurries. Maybe sleet instead of snow," Ken said. I groaned. Jenny and Ken have been going together for so long, they finish each other's sentences. It's really disgusting. Sometimes they're like an old married couple. They even fight like an old married couple. They yell at each other and call each other all kinds of horrible names. Then they kiss and make up and act as if nothing happened. I've seen them do it. and even though Jenny is my best friend, I have to say, it's disgusting. Maybe I'm jealous. I don't know. I guess I'm jealous of Jenny's dark, dramatic good looks. She's just about the most beautiful girl at Shadyside High, in my opinion. She has perfect hair, short and dark brown and sleek, and perfect oval-shaped blue eyes, and beautiful skin that always looks tanned. Jenny had a good bod, too. Not skinny and shapeless like mine. My little brother Jerry says I look like a 10-year-old boy. Nice kid, huh? With those awesome looks, Jenny should be the most confident person in the world. But she gets nervous at parties and sometimes gets totally tongue-tied in class. And she clings to Ken as if she can't get along without him. I don't know what her problem is. Not that Ken isn't good enough for her. He treats Jenny pretty nicely, actually. So many girls would die to go out with Ken. He's probably one of the best-looking guys at school, with his thick, wavy dark hair and dark eyes. And he's definitely the best built, tall and muscular, but not too bulky. What kind of Jeep does Dara have? Jenny asked. A Renegade? No way, Ken replied, shaking his head. She's got to have a Grand Cherokee. It's the biggest Jeep they make. It's like a truck. If it doesn't snow, we'll die of boredom, I declared unhappily. Maybe you will, but we won't, Ken replied, snickering. He turned and nuzzled his face against Jenny's cheek. She kissed him. Why do I have to spend so much time in my life watching Jenny and Ken make out? I turned my attention to Josh. Where do you go to school? I asked. He cleared his throat and pushed his glasses up on his nose. Cumberland, he replied. He wore a dark ski sweater over baggy faded jeans. He had his hands shoved into his jeans pockets. What year? I asked. 11th grade, he said. Me too. How do you know Dara? I asked. My father works with her father, Josh replied, glancing out the window. They're partners in the same law firm. Sometimes we vacation together, up at Cape Cod. I've been kind of bored, so I asked Dara if I could come up this weekend. So you know Dara pretty well, I commented. Yeah, pretty well, he said. I thought I saw his cheeks turn red. He turned to the window again, and I saw a glint of silver, a tiny lightning bolt on one earlobe. We rode along in silence for a minute or so. It was hard to keep a conversation going with Josh. I was running out of questions. Why did I have to ask all the questions, I wondered. Why didn't Josh ask me something? We don't know Dara that well, I babbled on. I mean, Dara hasn't lived in Shadyside long. We sit next to each other in science lab, and Dara asked if I'd like to come skiing this weekend and see her fabulous ski house. She said I could invite Ken and Jenny, so here we are. Josh nodded, but didn't reply. He was really giving me a pain. I don't like the strong silent types, or the weak silent types. I decided to force him to talk. Do you ski? I asked. I ski a little, but just well enough to break some bones, he replied. We both laughed. I was glad to see that at least Josh had a sense of humor. The fields had given way to pine woods, and the limo started to climb steep hills. We all took Cokes from the little refrigerator. Jenny picked up the car phone. She called our friend Corky Kokorin back in Shadyside, and bragged about how she was calling from a limo. Who else can we call? Ken asked. But the limo stopped suddenly. Ken set the phone back on its holder. The driver climbed out and opened the back door for us. Hey, we're here, I declared. I slid out onto the gravel driveway in front of the garage and took a deep breath. Cool, fresh mountain air. I shivered. It was much colder up here than it had been back in Shadyside. I gazed around at the dark pines that covered the hills, black shadows against a starless purple night sky. Hey, was that a snowflake? Ken asked, holding both palms up. You're the only flake up here, Jenny teased him. She shoved him with both hands. He pretended to stagger back until he landed on the hood of the limo. The driver had moved to the trunk and was pulling out our bags and skis. I turned and gazed at Dara's house. Wow, I uttered out loud. The house was long and low and beautiful. Jenny and Ken stepped up beside me, their shoes crunching over the gravel. It's so much bigger than I expected, I exclaimed. Built of redwood panels with enormous windows along the front, the house looked like a traditional ski lodge. A ski lodge that had been stretched out to cover the entire hilltop. I've been here before, Josh announced. It's awesome. There are no other houses around to ruin the view. There are glass doors and huge windows in back. You can see down the hill for miles. Pale white light suddenly rolled over the front of the house. We turned and saw 2 headlights floating through the darkness, hovering nearer. Dara's Jeep pulled up beside the limo, jerking to an abrupt stop an inch or two from our suitcases. The headlights flared over the front of the house. Dara honked the horn twice. Then she jumped out and came running over to greet us, her streaky blonde hair flying behind her. She was alone, I saw. No parents. "You got here so fast," she cried. "I wanted to be here before you arrived." Dara's blue ski jacket was unzipped over a white sweater. "Dara, where are your parents?" I asked. "They couldn't make it, but I'm sure we can survive without them," Dara declared, with a mischievous gleam in her eyes. I swallowed hard. I knew my parents would never approve, but I was here now. I decided I just wouldn't tell them. "Where's the snow?" she demanded, gazing up at the sky. "How can we ski without snow? We'll go crazy up here. What will we do? I hate charades. Promise me we won't play charades. And I stink at Trivial Pursuit. I can't remember anything about the Partridge Family or the Brady Bunch. Really, the last time I played, I threw the cards in the fire." That's the way Dara always talks, without taking a breath, always excited, and she has a hoarse, croaky kind of voice, which makes her sound kind of comical. Dara is nice looking, really cute, but not naturally beautiful like Jenny. She has long tangles of crimped blonde hair, which she has streaked with white blonde. She has a perky little nose. I don't think it's hers. I think she had a nose job before she moved to Shadyside last year. Her best feature is her eyes. They're big and round and pale, pale blue. Dara fumbled in a pocket of her ski jacket and pulled out her keys. "It's got to snow. Maybe we'll all do a snow dance under the moonlight later," she said as she unlocked the front door and pushed it open. She turned to the limo driver. "Frank, would you bring the bags into the house? I'll show you where they go. The skis go in the locker around back." The driver nodded and moved quickly to grab up the bags. "Hi, Dara." Josh stepped forward shyly, his hands awkwardly at his sides. "Oh, Josh, I didn't see you," Dara exclaimed. "I forgot you were coming," she added cruelly. "Hey, listen. Invite yourself up any time. You know there's plenty of room. How's it going?" She didn't wait for Josh to reply. Instead, she turned to me. "April, let me see that parka. Does it have a fur lining? I've been looking for one just like that." I caught a hurt expression on Josh's face. I think he hoped for a better greeting from Dara. I was holding my new blue ski parka in my arms. I held it up for Dara to see. "It's really warm," I said, "and it wasn't very expensive." I suddenly felt foolish. Dara didn't care if the parka was expensive or not. Her family didn't have to pinch pennies like mine. She probably didn't even check out the price tag when she bought a coat. "What's the fur inside?" she asked, rubbing it with her palm. Soft. "I think it's dog fur," I joked. And then I added, "Actually, it's fake." Dara laughed. "Come on in, guys." She held open the storm door. "I hope the heat is on. The furnace conked out last winter, and all the pipes froze. Just be thankful you weren't here. My dad went ballistic." I followed Ken and Jenny into the house. Behind me, I heard Josh say something to Dara, but she didn't hear him. She was giving Frank, the driver, more instructions. It was pitch black inside the house. I fumbled on the wall for the light switch, but couldn't find it. I heard the limo door slam. Headlights slid over the wall as the car backed down the drive. Frank was driving the limo back the 100 miles to Shadyside. Josh moved beside me. Just ahead of us, Ken had his arm around Jenny's shoulders. "Dara, where's the light?" I called. I took a step forward. It was so dark. "Hey!" Jenny let out a cry of surprise. "What was that?" she whispered. I heard it too. A creaking floorboard. All four of us froze in the darkness, listening hard. I heard a footstep. Then a thud, the sound of someone bumping against a chair or table. A cough. We're not alone, I realized. Someone is in here with us. Chapter 2. I took a step back. The footsteps came closer. I heard another cough. Behind me, Dara was just entering the house. She hadn't heard the sounds yet. Who was in the house, I wondered, gripped with fear. Some homeless people who had wandered in during the week? Burglars? The lights clicked on. "Hey!" Dara cried in surprise. We stared at a boy and a girl, about our age. They stared back at us. They appeared just as startled as we were. "Tony, what are you doing here?" Dara demanded. She knew the guy. Her tone wasn't exactly warm. "Dara, he stammered. As he stepped forward, I could see that his long brown hair was messed up, and he had smeared purple lipstick marks all over his cheeks and chin. I didn't have to guess that Tony and the girl had been making out in the dark. They were so involved with each other, they hadn't heard us drive up. Hi, Dara," Tony said. He had a nice smile, but I didn't really like his face. There was something smug and stuck up about it. I could see that right away, and I hate guys with deep clefts in their chins. I don't know why, I just don't like it. This is Carly Ray, Tony told Dara. He pulled the girl forward. She seemed really embarrassed. Nice to meet you, she muttered. Carly's purple lipstick was smeared, and her auburn hair was messed up too, down over her forehead. She sure had a lot of it. She was short and skinny. She wore a red sweater that really didn't look good with her hair color. She had on a short black skirt over red tights. Her gums showed when she smiled. This isn't your week, Dara told him angrily, hands pressed against her waist. I can't believe you. Tony slapped his forehead. Did I mess up? Carly wiped a purple lipstick smear off Tony's cheek with one hand. Did I mess up? Tony replied. I'm sorry, Dara. I really thought this was my family's week. He didn't sound very sincere. I had never seen him before, but I could tell he was putting on a performance. He seems like a pretty phony guy. Dara turned to Jenny, Ken, and me. Meet Tony Macedo. His family and my family share this house, she explained. We have it every other week. And I thought it was our week, Tony declared, shaking his head. It's a really nice house, Carly commented to Dara. Very pretty. How could you see any of it in the dark? I wondered. Tony, I don't believe you did this, Dara said sharply, ignoring Carly's comment. Dara blew a wisp of hair off her forehead. I could see she was really angry. Tony's mouth spread into a sheepish grin. I don't believe I did it either, he replied. He slid an arm around Carly's waist. She cuddled against him and mumbled something in his ear. They couldn't seem to keep their hands off each other. But I don't get it, Dara sputtered. Don't your parents keep a calendar? Don't they keep a record of... My parents don't actually know I'm here, Tony confessed. His dark eyes flashed. You can keep a secret, right, Dara? He tried to keep it light, but I thought I heard a tiny threat in the way Tony said it. I mean, Carly and I sort of decided to come here at the last minute, he added. Carly smiled her toothy smile at us and held on to Tony. But how did you get here? Dara demanded. I didn't see a car or anything outside. We flew up to Eastham, Carly answered. Then we took a taxi. You came all the way up here without a car? Dara rolled her eyes. We really didn't think about it, Tony replied. It was a tough week. We just wanted to get away, do some skiing. I wondered if they had brought skis. They didn't seem to have outdoor activities on their minds at all. Suddenly, Dara leaned close to me. He's trouble, she whispered. Tony always is trouble. What did she mean? I wondered. I didn't have a chance to ask. Tossing her streaked hair over her shoulder, Dara turned back to Tony. Well, how are we going to settle this? She demanded. Settle it. He pretended he didn't understand. I didn't really understand what she meant either. Who's staying and who's going? Dara asked sharply. Tony's smile faded. His dark eyes narrowed menacingly. I felt a chill of fear. He can be dangerous, I found myself thinking. He let go of Carly and took a step toward Dara. His expression hardened. He balled both hands into fists. He's deliberately trying to scare us, I realized. I know how to settle it, Tony said coldly. Chapter 3. Dara didn't back down. She kept her hands pressed against her waist and stood her ground. Tony took another menacing step toward her. Ken stepped up beside Dara and glared at Tony. Ken is bigger than Tony, I thought, and a lot more powerful looking. If there was a fight, I think Ken would win. Only one way to settle it, Tony repeated. We'll just have to share. He burst out laughing. I let out a sigh of relief. Tony had really fooled me. Dara shook her head and frowned. Tony, you really are a jerk, she muttered. Did I ever tell you how much I hate your sick sense of humor? Lots of times, Tony replied. But at least I have a sense of humor, Dara. Oh, good one, Josh chimed in. I had completely forgotten Josh was there. He had wandered over by the fireplace, across the room from the rest of us. He had lifted a fireplace poker from its stand and held it in one hand. You keep out of it, Josh, Dara said sharply. Yeah, keep out of it, Josh, Tony parroted, grinning. He turned to Dara. Who's Josh? Just a guy, Dara replied. His father and my father work together. Lawyer dudes, Tony exclaimed. Dara introduced the rest of us to Tony and Carly. Tony spent a long time gazing at Jenny, checking her out. I caught an annoyed glimmer in Carly's eyes. She wrapped her hands around Tony's arm. I guess we have no choice. We'll share the house, Dara agreed grudgingly. She gazed sternly at Tony. I guess we can get along for one weekend. There's a first time for everything, he declared. Carly laughed uncomfortably. Jenny and I exchanged glances. It was obvious to both of us that Dara had had trouble with Tony in the past. "There are plenty of bedrooms," Dara said, counting them on her fingers. She stared up at Tony, who was nuzzling Carly's cheek. "Do you and Carly plan to share a room?" Tony stepped away from Carly. He shook his head at Dara. "You always did have a dirty mind," he told her. "It takes one to know one," Dara shot back. "Carly and I have already staked out separate rooms," Tony replied, ignoring Dara's wisecrack. He gestured to Ken and Josh. "These guys can share the room with a bunk bed. No problem." "I have to sleep on the top," Josh said, swinging the fireplace poker. "I get claustrophobic." "No problem," Ken replied. "See? And all the girls get to have their very own rooms," Tony said, grinning his smug grin. He walked over and draped an arm around Dara's shoulders. "Isn't this going to be fun?" Dara glared back at him coldly and didn't reply. We all went to our rooms to unpack. The house stretched out in 2 long wings, with the big living room and the kitchen in the middle. The boys' rooms were down at the end of the long hall that stretched to the left. The girls took the wing to the right. Dara had her own room, the one nearest the living room. Jenny and I had rooms across from each other, halfway down the hall. Carly's room was next to Jenny's. Jenny unpacked quickly and came into my room. "What a view!" she declared, pulling back the white curtains and peering out the double-glass doors. I stepped up beside her. We could see dark pine trees all the way down the steeply sloping hill. The night sky had turned a hazy pink. "Look, it's snowing!" I cried, pointing. "Call that snow?" Jenny complained. "It's just a few flakes." "But it's a start," I declared cheerily. I really wanted to have a good time this weekend. It had been a pretty dreary winter for me so far. I had broken up with my boyfriend in October. A few weeks after that, my mom had lost her job, which meant the family was on an even tighter budget than usual, and then I had missed nearly 2 weeks of school with a really bad flu. Time to have some fun, I decided. As I told Josh in the car, I didn't know Dara very well. She had moved to Shadyside a few weeks before school started, but when she invited me to her ski house, I jumped at the chance. Jenny and I returned to the living room to find a bright fire blazing in a wide stone fireplace. Ken and Tony were piling on more logs from a basket of firewood in the corner. I was glad they had built a fire. With all the big windows and sliding glass doors, the house was really drafty. As I lowered myself into a soft, comfortable armchair facing the fire, I could feel the chill of a breeze from the glass doors behind me. Feeling the warmth of the fire, listening to it crackle, I gazed around the big, wood-paneled room. There were 2 seating areas, 2 circles of armchairs and dark leather couches. A long wooden coffee table was cluttered with stacks of old magazines and newspapers. Large, framed posters of European ski resorts filled the walls. Tony stepped away from the fire and turned to admire it for a few seconds. Then he joined Carly on a couch at the back of the room. A few seconds later, the 2 of them were smooching away. They didn't seem to care, or even notice, that the rest of us were there in the room. Ken and Jenny shared a big, overstuffed armchair near me. They gazed silently at the fire. Josh sat by himself on the end of the couch, tapping his hand rapidly on the padded arm. "Come on, snow!" Dara cried. She stood at the window, her hands pressed against the glass, peering out at the few flakes drifting slowly down from the sky. "What does a pink sky mean?" she demanded. "Does that mean snow or no snow?" "It means pink snow," Ken joked. Dara spun around and rolled her eyes. "You're about as funny as Tony," she told Ken. Then she turned to the couple in the back of the room. "Don't you 2 ever come up for air?" "We don't hear you," Tony called back to her. Dara dropped down on the other end of Josh's couch. "Nice fire," she commented, raising her feet to the coffee table. "We'll have to get more firewood later." The 5 of us chatted for a while, about school, and about kids we knew. I kept glancing over at the front window, checking out the snow. It was coming down a little harder, big fluffy flakes. "I know a great way to start a weekend," Ken said suddenly, scratching his thick brown hair. "A big snowfall would start the weekend off just right," Dara commented. "No, I mean break the ice," Ken said. "We don't really know each other that well." He glanced at Josh, who had stopped tapping his hand and was staring into the fire. "It would be fun to play a game or something. Something to help us get to know each other. Truth or dare?" "Excuse me. I don't think so," Josh declared. "Don't you like to play Truth or Dare?" I asked him. Josh shook his head. "I don't really like games." He glanced uncomfortably at Dara. "I think it's a great idea," Dara exclaimed excitedly. "Let's do it. Let's play. It's a perfect game for tonight. Let's see what dirty secrets we can drag out of one another. I laughed. I found myself beginning to like Dara. I liked the way she threw herself into things, the way she got excited so quickly. Dara lowered her feet and leaned forward eagerly. We all leaned forward. Josh groaned, but agreed to join us. And so we began our game of Truth or Dare. It seems like a really good idea at the time. As Ken had said, a good way to break the ice, to get to know one another. We had no idea of knowing that a simple game would lead us to so much horror. Chapter 4. Tony, do you two want to play? Dara called to the back of the room. They didn't reply. Something popped in the fire. The sound made me jump. I realized I felt a little tense. I always get tense before starting a game like this. I guess everyone does. I mean, it's so easy to make a total fool of yourself in Truth or Dare. I've never played Truth or Dare, Josh confessed. He pushed back his black hair, then adjusted his glasses. Is it like 20 questions? No way, Jenny replied. Truth or Dare is real simple, Dara told Josh. Even you can get it. Oh, wow. You're cruel tonight, Dara, Josh accused, shaking his head. Just being a good hostess, Dara joked. Either you answer a question with the truth or you accept a dare, Ken explained to Josh. That's all there is to it. Josh still appeared puzzled. You'll see how it works, Dara told him. Ken can take the first question, since this was his idea. Okay, Ken gulped. He glanced at Jenny, who snuggled beside him in the big armchair. The flickering, darting fire made shadows dance over the room. Outside I could see the snow starting to come down harder. I smiled, feeling warm and cozy in front of the fire. What is something you did that you're really ashamed of? Dara asked Ken. Excuse me? He cried, his mouth dropping open. Dara asked it again. What is something that bothered your conscience for a long, long time? Ken laughed. Oh, wow. I think Josh should go first, since it's his first game. No way, Josh cried. He jumped up from the couch and made his way to the fireplace. Just kidding, Ken told him. Will you answer the question? Dara asked Ken. Or will you take a dare? Don't you have any multiple choice questions? Ken joked. Hey Ken, this was your idea, I shouted. Come on, let's play. Okay, he grumbled, shifting uncomfortably in the chair. I'll answer the question. Josh picked up the fireplace poker and began poking at the logs, sending up glowing cinders. Something I'm ashamed of, Ken murmured, thinking hard. You'd better leave me out of it, Jenny threatened. She laughed an uncomfortable laugh. Oh, I remember something, Ken told us. This was pretty bad. It better be, Dara said. I was in a store once, a long time ago. It was that comic book store on Division Street. Remember it? I don't think it's there anymore. This is boring, Josh muttered, poking at the fire. Shh, let him get to the good part, Dara told him. Well, Ken continued, I saw a kid in there. A little kid, maybe 7 or 8. And the kid dropped a $10 bill. I guess it fell out of his pocket. And I picked it up off the floor and jammed it in my pocket. The kid searched and searched for it, and he started to cry. But I didn't tell him I'd found it. I kept the $10. And what did you do with it? Dara asked him. Bought comic books, Ken replied. Pretty bad, huh? It bothered me for months. Ken, I don't believe you. That's the worst thing you ever did, Jenny exclaimed, shaking her head. A grin spread over Ken's face. What could I tell you? Normally, I'm a saint, he boasted. Boring, Dara declared. You asked for something that stayed on my conscience, Ken cried, so I answered the question. But we want something sexy, Dara complained. We don't want to hear a dumb story about finding $10 in a comic book store. Ken thinks $10 is sexy, I joked. Everybody laughed. Let's think of a sexy question for Dara, Ken suggested. Whoa. Dara held up both hands as if to shield herself. A grin spread over her face. I've got a sexy question for you, April. Uh-oh, I murmured. I swallowed hard. Dara's eyes gleamed with excitement. What's the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you while you were making out with a boy? She asked me. You mean like, did I burp or something? I asked, thinking hard. I could feel my face turn red hot. I knew I was blushing. The question or the dare? Dara insisted. The question, I answered. Once I was down in our family room, kissing this boy. Who? Ken demanded, grinning. Yeah, who? Tony chimed in from the back of the room. You wouldn't know him, I called back to him. Anyway, I was kissing him, and I forgot I was chewing gum. And somehow my gum went from my mouth into his. Oh, gross, Jenny declared, making a disgusted face. And he started to choke on it, I added, and I had to keep slapping him on the back until I coughed it up. Yuck, Jenny murmured. Pretty good, Dara commented. My face was still red hot. I hate embarrassing games like this. At least my turn is over for now, I thought gratefully. An idea popped into my head. Dara, I have a kissing question for you. I'm listening, she said, resting her chin in her hand and staring hard at me. Dara, of all the guys you've kissed, who was the worst kisser and why? Dara let out a sharp laugh. Good question, April. Jenny giggled. Ken eyed her sternly. Jenny, it's Dara's question. What are you giggling about? The question or the dare? I asked Dara. The question, she replied quickly. The worst kisser, huh? Slowly, she raised her head and turned it to the fireplace. A slow smile spread over her face as she gazed at Josh. She's going to name Josh, I realized. Josh's eyes bulged. A look of sheer panic twisted his features. Dara wouldn't do that, I told myself. She couldn't be that mean, could she? Her mischievous grin grew wider as she locked her eyes on Josh. The worst kisser. Before Dara could say another word, Josh raised the poker. Shut up, Dara, he screamed. Shut up, I mean it. Josh, I have to tell the truth, Dara declared cruelly. No. Josh uttered a raging howl, and before any of us could move, he came charging furiously at Dara, lowering the poker toward her chest.